think this is like advice that I've heard from other people, and I'll just reshare it because I think it was really helpful to us, is if you're like pulling teeth to get customers to use your product, you're probably not finding product market fit. I've been in this place where I'm like, oh no, it's because I'm not following up correctly. My messaging is bad. Like I'm not using the right channels. But like if people aren't coming, it's probably they don't want it. Versus in this case, finally, we had figured out something where we were like, oh, people are ready like today to start using this.
Can I use it now?
Can I use
Like
it?
how much does it cost? Yeah.
When
So they're
people
starting
asking those questions like 15 minutes into the first call is when I was like, oh, this is like a real thing.
This is a hair and fire problem that people want. They have a budget to solve it right now. There's a real cost. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Prachie Banthia, founder and CEO of Lightscreen AI. Prachie has an impressive track record in the tech world, having led product teams at Assembly AI, GoPuff, and even started her career at Google as part of the prestigious APM program. Wow. With her expertise in AI, product development, and marketplace growth, she's now building Lightscreen AI, a YC-backed cutting-edge platform transforming technical hiring. Really cool demo, actually. I'm wondering if we'll get into that. Let's dive into her journey. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. It's been a couple months since we met at Demo Day for YC. Congrats on all the progress. I know that's always an arduous journey coming through that program.
Oh yeah, the journey is just beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
The arduous journey continues. But oh yeah, it was great to meet.
So, I mean, you had a great career going. Like, what inspires you to switch lanes and go into kind of a founder mode?
I think I'm probably like a lot of people in that the entrepreneurship bug was always there. Small size. When I was in college, I, with a friend, started a dance company. And so that happened, and that like has still, that company still exists. And like, it gives me so much joy to see the program, and they have no idea who I am, which just like feels amazing that they like, are just doing their own thing now. It's an autonomous thing. And then when I was at RhinoS, which was a small startup that we sold to GoPuff, I just worked harder there than I'd ever had in my entire life. And I was kind of shocked at myself at how hard I was working. And it was because I cared so much about the people I was working with and the like mission we were trying to solve for. And I was like, if I could do this, but with the risk profile of a founder, like work this hard and care this much, it just seems like amazing. So I kept getting closer and closer to being a founder until eventually this moment in time, I'm sure everyone who's listening to your podcast is like a broken record to them, but it is such a moment in time to start a company. Like there is just so much exciting stuff happening. Everything is changing. You can start a company, I feel like, in anything that you're interested in and be able to upend.
It's like mobile 2009 right now is what it feels like. Because I kind of lived through that last iteration. I wasn't quite in tech yet. That was about the time I started getting into tech, was 2009, 10. So it kind of has that energy to it where you're like, yeah, there's so much to do.
I just feel like you could go anywhere and there's something interesting to build, which I feel like was not there even 5 years ago. Gavin, my co-founder, and I have known each other for a decade, and he had wanted to start something. I was finally in a place like just like financially and mentally where I was like stable enough where I was like, I can like do something more fun. And it was such a perfect time to do it that I had to just make the jump.
Yeah. How did you guys meet? I mean, that's pretty unique to know your co-founder for 10 years or more.
So I met Gavin officially when I was working at Google. Gavin and I worked in the same building on the Google Cloud team. We didn't work like professionally very closely, but I do think one of the great things about, someone once told me this when I was starting at Google or deciding to work at Google, that one of the best things you get out of Google is just like you get to know a lot of great engineers, and that might be your future co-founders one day.
Great people, yeah.
Gavin, and I met at Google, but we weren't really working together. We just like would play board games together and things like that. And I ended up marrying his best friend. And so when my husband and I were dating, I was basically living at Gavin's house because they were roommates. And so I got to know Gavin very well, just like personally during that time. And when I was optimizing for who to start a company with, that's of course the like, you want a 10x engineer who you can trust to do the engineering work. But I think just as important is someone that you already know you like, and like you could spend a random Wednesday with, and it'll be like a little bit more fun, and you can like go through the hard stuff with. So I did optimize also for just like values and someone I like want to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah. And I think that's something that YC looks at pretty closely in their application process is what's the history of these co-founders.
There are founder teams there that like just met right before YC for sure. But I think which I like kudos to them. Like I feel like that would be hard for me to like invest so much time with someone I barely know. But it's rare, definitely. Yeah. It's really nice if the people have known each other a long time, because I think founder breakups are one of the biggest reasons companies fail out of YC. So they just don't want that. Like, they're trying to minimize failure as much as possible.
I see it all the time in my portfolio. I mean,
really?
Of the shutdowns that we've had, I can think of right off the top of my head, like 2 or 3 of those are one of the founder leaves. And actually 3. And I think 2 of them are YC companies actually, where one of the founder leaves. They just decide it's not for them anymore or whatever. They're go back to their cushy 7-figure job at Google or whatever.
Yeah, I think Grit, there's a great book called Grit, which I would recommend to any founder. It's an older book, I guess, but it really left an impression on me. It's a lot of Dalton as a talk at the end of YC of just like, just don't fail. And that's like half the battle, or just don't give up. And that's
just
like
don't give up.
the battle. If you're already like decent at the other stuff, like just keep trying things. And I think it was something I really respect a lot in Gavin. Gavin has wanted to do a startup for a long time and has kind of not given up on that dream. And I just know as someone who's not going to give up, which
I love it.
And I think having accountability of a partner is helpful.
That's amazing. So what was the origin story behind Lightscreen?
So let me explain Lightscreen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. So Lightscreen is a voice and video based AI interviewer. We're already being used by, I guess, multiple companies today to screen their technical candidates. So it's an AI, it's like a drop-in replacement for a coding interview. And the big differentiator is we don't just assess coding skills, because we actually think that's not going to be what is the most important for an engineer in the next 5 years, but actually the critical thinking skills, problem solving, technical communication at scale. And the idea so I'll say a few things. So one is we did have a bit of the drunken walk, is I guess what people call it, or the random walk of, you're trying one idea, you're prototyping it, you realize it's a terrible idea. You try another idea, you're prototyping. Prototyping helps you realize what is actually a good idea and what isn't. So we did a lot of building. I have some friends from business school who are also in the founder. We're also trying to start something, and people can get into analysis paralysis. So instead, our orientation was just let's build something shitty and see if we feel like this actually would be good. And so we did a bit of that. And also Gavin and I just spent a lot of time brainstorming, we know AI is going to change everything, especially the tasks that are most low ROI, repetitive, expensive for companies today. And what are the most low ROI, repetitive, expensive tasks that we had to do or our teams had to do at our previous jobs? That was doing technical interviews. And so we started first with actually something kind of less ambitious, like a co-pilot in your interview that is sitting there taking the notes for you and doing the evaluation of the candidate after the interview, of a human to human interview. But when we built it, we were like, this is fine, but there's actually something way more ambitious we could build, way more interesting, where we actually save the engineer the time of even doing the interview, and actually have an AI voice bot that can do the interview. So we started with knowing where there was a pain in our personal lives, and then iterating from there until we got to something that actually felt like, oh, this is a good product, which some of it comes from just taste at the beginning before you can show it to people.
Yeah. So interesting. So it wasn't this eureka first time out, oh, well, we want to do a startup together and we know exactly what we're going to work on. You guys knew you wanted to do a startup together. You had the pre-existing relationship, and now you're out there kind of prototyping, searching, talking to people, doing user discovery. This all occurred before you applied to YC, or was this all during?
This happened maybe a month before we applied to YC. Very right around the same time. On my end, I picked my co-founder first and picked the idea second, if that makes sense, because I knew I wanted to work. A lot of being a founder is what does the day-to-day look like? I think just getting through the day-to-day is the hard thing for a lot of people and where people fail. So just having someone you want to spend the day-to-day with was most important to me. And then finding a real pain point and doing the 0 to 1 thing was something I wasn't as worried about. I guess the only filter I put on that someone gave me advice on that I thought was very helpful was to find a space where you feel confident you can get 250 conversations, because this person's thesis, which I thought was really good. I'm trying to remember who it was. It was a YC founder, and I should give them credit. But they were just if you talk to 250 people, similar people on anything, you can probably find a pain point and probably figure out something that will have some amount of product market fit. Just figure out what is the 250 people that you could actually talk to pretty quickly. And everything is changing right now anyway. If you know how to execute, you can just find the problem. And so I was lucky in that engineering managers are a group of people that I can have 250 conversations with very easily.
As a PM, you talk to engineering managers all the time. You got a big network. Your co-founder obviously does as well, having come from that background. And
yeah, this is the beauty of Silicon Valley. People are willing to help. If you just reach out even on LinkedIn to someone you barely know, people often will spend 30 minutes with you and talk to you about things.
Unless they're a VC and then they're it's off thesis, too early for us to take the calls. If it comes through my network, they're hey, I got a startup idea. And I already know, oh, it's somebody I know. I already know this is going to probably waste my time, but it's going to help them so much.
Oh, yeah. It's worth the time sometimes. The world's small.
Yeah.
It's
so small.
Do the work.
And then I got to tell my friend, gosh, I don't think I would invest in your startup, just so you know. Sorry.
Yeah. That is a problem I actually have too, even just with business school people, because everyone, knows you're also startup kind of thing. I'm dude, I don't have money right now. I'm
I just
left
left my high paying job to do this. What is it like to be in YC with a business degree, right? Because you have an MBA and, YC definitely has this like kind of hacker slant to it.
I mean, I think there's two things. This isn't like, I don't know, two things. One is, I mean, none of us in YC know what we're doing at the beginning, right? Like, should be super transparent. It's like, it's not like I don't know any more or less than any other technical founder. Like, none of us know.
Well, and YC's also gone they've gone a lot earlier over the last like 4 or 5 years since I started investing in YC. They used to pick companies that had, 500K of ARR. They're basically like almost on their way to a Series A company. They're like a real seed company, 500K, a million. But now it seems like, I think Gary Tan has kind of shifted it a little earlier, and he's starting to take just basically teams with ideas.
It kind of goes back to what my company's thesis is, which is also what I feel like I'm seeing in the founders. It's not really about like who knows how to write code anymore or who knows how to do Google ads. It's really about who can critically think and like have a good user interview and like get to truth. It's the same things that you would look for in employees is also what a good founder, I think, would.
I would like to tug on that thread a little bit because I agree. And it's something that I think kind of this generative AI, large language model, agentic movement is changing about the business landscape, which is
so exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And like, you don't have to be, I don't know, very deeply technical to add a ton of value very quickly to companies and users at those companies. You just have to have a little bit of context and, like you said, be able to critically think and interview them and figure out what their pain points are. And then you can very quickly get a technical solution together. So it's almost like the disappearance of technological moats. We're needing to be deeply technical to get a Hello World site up, like in the late 90s, or somewhat technical to hack AWS together 15 years ago to get it to work and build something. Now it's just maybe, I don't know what you think about this statement, but maybe founder market fit is becoming more important. Like you said back, like who can you talk to 250 people of in what area? And that's a lot of your founder market fit in a way, right?
Yeah, I haven't thought enough about this. I've thought about this enough for like employees, just because we're, an AI interviewer for employees in terms of what is going to matter more for the future white collar worker kind of. But I imagine it's the same for founder.
I plug in like every like piece of founder material that I have on a company into ChatGPT, and I'm like, analyze a startup. And I've done this a few times, and it'll come up with this just amazingly comprehensive analysis. But it's still like, I think to your point, what you just said is it doesn't critically think through all the points, right? It's still up to like a human judgment has to kind of look at everything, beautiful mind, and make all the connections. AI can kind of line up all the data for you in a way and kind of give you like a really good first or second year analyst out of undergrad would. It can kind of line up all the data for you, but you kind of need that executive mind to kind of look at everything.
Yeah, I think it was the CEO of JetBlue once spoke to us at business. And one thing he said, that obviously doesn't matter to me right now as a startup, but it really stuck to me as an executive, was every decision that he should be making as the CEO of JetBlue is like the 49-51 decision. And otherwise, like, he's not delegating appropriately, basically. The 70-30 decision, it's kind of like, why am I making this decision?
If it's an obvious decision, somebody on the team should have made it by now.
Make those decisions, sure. It's fine for me to make those decisions, but there are always going to be 50-50 decisions. And like, are you like, who do you trust in that situation, right? You want to trust someone who has been specifically assessed to be very good at making 50-50 decisions, to the point on like whether, like, I think for both founders and for employees, being able to make those sorts of tough calls really well is what's going to more.
That's really interesting. And I think the analogy that I like to use, and being a VC, is like all the incoming decks I get to look at, right? AI can't make a decision whether or not I should meet with each of those companies, but it can prioritize, do the 70-30 or the 80-20. Hey, these look pretty good. You should probably look at these first. These ones look okay. Maybe look at these second. And these ones look pretty bad. Maybe look at these last if you have time. And what's the corollary there with Lightscreen, right? Because you're assessing the critical thinking of the candidate, not necessarily their coding skills, but how they think through the logic of solving these coding challenges.
I think what we can't tell you, or what AI can't tell you today, is like, will you like working with this person? That's like, will you want to get a beer with this person? Will this person like fit into your team dynamic correctly and like be like complementary skill set? What we can tell you is this person is technically competent at their job, or like at the level that you need them to be, and like we have faith can like grow into the other pieces of it. And I think when I say technical competence, I do mean that broadly, like in terms of critical thinking skills and ability to explain their code and like things like that. Like those are all things that we assess for. this person going to be the right fit for your team in this moment? And like, even like you as a manager and an employee, like, is this just like the right fit for you? That's not the part that we assess. So it's kind of the same thing of what you're saying is I think we could, at this point, like 40% of candidates is what we're seeing cheat on interviews, like an insane number. So like the fact that we can just cut out those 40% for you is like pretty value add immediately for companies. And then we can tell you the candidates that can't code or that can code, but not to the level you're looking for. But then there's this whole set of people that can code to the level you're looking for. And at that point, you do have to make yourself as a hiring manager.
It's kind of interesting, right? It's almost like the same funnel as getting into grad school. You and I both got MBAs, so we had to like take the GMAT and all that stuff and, you know, write good essays and get letters of rec and all this stuff. You know, and if you think about all these like hurdles of getting into a good graduate school or getting a good job, they're kind of similar, right? Getting a PM job at Google, like pay consultants thousands of dollars to prep them for that. To what degree, like if you're an engineer, could you prep for the Lightscreen screening? Like, you know, and isn't all, you know, thinking to a certain extent just correlated with preparation and doing a lot of these exercises, watching lots of YouTube videos, practicing with lots of people? And could you get better at this? And will Lightscreen in the future help people prepare as well? Because that's the other side of this two-sided screening process, right?
One thing that I think is exciting about AI doing evaluations of candidates is that I guess there's two pieces of it. One is the interviewer, because the interviewer's AI can spend kind of as long as necessary with the candidate to like really understand what their strengths are and weaknesses are. And when we think about what we want Lightscreen to feel like to a candidate, it should feel like Lightscreen is like helping you show off your best skills to the company. It's not like a antagonistic kind of interview experience. It should be like, what are you really good at and how do I show that to the company? Whether or not that's a good fit for the company is like a different piece of it, but like, what is your magic is where I'd like to get to with Lightscreen. And so it's not really about like, yes, you can prepare for it and all of that, but really I think hiring is a bit of an art, even at like more senior levels. So it really is like, what is this candidate's like vector of skills? What are the things that are successful at this company in terms of vector of skills and how much do those things match? And then on your other question around like, you know, will we go into actually helping candidates prepare for interviews? Yes, but the extension of that is I think Lightscreen can help candidates learn skills that are going to be relevant in the AI future, all the things that we've just been talking about. Can we like help you get better? And what I learned way back in the day when I worked at Google, I worked at Google for Education. And one of the things I learned there was people teach to the test a little bit. Like whatever the evaluation metric is kind of what we end up learning. It'll, you know, you manage what you measure sort of thing. That's why I started with one of the reasons to start with evaluations is like, make sure we're evaluating for the things that will matter in the future. And then like, I think there will naturally become a need also for like reskilling people and teaching people these skills. And I think Lightscreen can also move into that. So there's a lot to do.
Because, you know, if you go through these, and I remember back, you know, 10 years ago when I was interviewing for jobs, you know, they'd have you like do some assignment or one of these things. I just flat out refuse to do them. I'm just not going to do it. You know, like I got an MBA from a top school. I'm smart enough. I'm not going to do your work assignment. Interview me if like, and see if I'm a cultural fit. But I think it's a little different for engineers, right? Because you kind of do need to assess those technical chops, right?
I think the world is changing in a way like where you are not just looking for US-based companies are not just looking for US-based engineers. Honestly, the market has just gotten more competitive for everything, but especially engineering. I think where people are hiring engineers in Latin America and Asia, all over the place, where like, honestly, I think there is like sometimes more of a willingness to do these take-home assignments. And there's just more of a understanding that like people,
they're not prima donnas like me living in Silicon Valley. And they're like, I'd be lucky to make the 6-figure salary at some name brand tech company from Chile.
A little bit like, we don't want to.
Yeah.
On the flip side of it, you know, for me, I get excited about, you know, when I was an undergrad, I went to Pomona College, which is a fantastic undergrad, but it's not like one of those like big names you might hear every day. Some recruiter at Google like found my resume out of a pile and like gave me a shot of interviewing. And like that only happened because Google has so many resources around interviewing for the APM program. Program changed my life. And like that only happened because they were willing to like figure out how to interview people at scale.
Yeah.
Actually assess for skills, not just for like what's on the resume. And I do think resumes have become less and less useful over time, even at like the top levels. So one of the reasons I'm excited about building an AI interviewer, just from you know, good for the world, is like, you know, if you can actually scale up the ability to interview candidates and give candidates a shot, you're actually building more of a meritocratic organization.
At what point in the process do you find your customers using Lightscreen? Is it right like post application? Is it like past the first phone screen? When do they kind of like to insert the screening tool?
So what we found so far, just in terms of stats from Lightscreen, so we've only been launched 2 months, but what I can say is one of our customers did do an analysis of the interviews we had done for them. And we passed 12% of the candidates onwards from the Lightscreen interview. And of those 12%, they were using us as a very first screen, like before they had talked to anyone at the company. So 12% of the candidates passed that first screen. And of those that did pass, 50% of them ended up getting offers. Ratio, we just got that data, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
Early on, but like you can see that the signal is really high. Because I think it's not just coding interview, right? It is doing it really is, I think, because it's able, like people are able to communicate their things, which is just a much higher bar if people are able to communicate their code versus just write their.
You're only passing 1 out of 10, and 1 out of 2 of those, half of those are getting a job offer.
At least so far, that is what I've seen.
Versus like, what was it before? They would do, how many would pass? What was the kind of lift on that?
I don't actually know what this customer was doing before. What I've seen on average from what I've like historically is, you might have like each round, you only drop like 20 to 30% of candidates. You really don't pass only 12%. You pass like 70% in each round, and then slowly get to like your 1 to 5 candidates that you might give offers. So dropping it down to like 90% at the beginning is huge value prop. So because of that, companies are using us very early on in their process. They might do a recruiter screen ahead of that, like a 10-minute, just like check on like visas, and also like have a face, like a relationship with the candidate. So the expectations are set, but then we happen very early because you can use us at scale for as many interviews as you want. And then invest double the time if you want of your human time on like the few candidates that pass.
Right. Yeah, that's really awesome. What's the rubric look like if I'm a hiring manager now, considering somebody that's gone through the Lightscreen process, and I have the 12% of candidates here, maybe 100. So I'm looking at the top 10 out of 100. How am I prioritizing? What kind of reports? What's that rubric look like from you guys?
I guess I could try to show you one, but basically the rubric has 3 sections. You can see this now. So basically what you're seeing is what the evaluation looks like that a company gets a few minutes after a Lightscreen interview is complete. Normally there's a full video of the interview in the top right corner. You can also see here, you can see the candidate's code over time. You can see the transcript of the candidate, and then our AI, who's named Ethan, who like will provide hints sometimes, or, we'll do kind of what a traditional human interviewer would do, ask about time complexity and follow-up questions and make things harder depending on how the candidate is doing. And then we have 3 buckets here. That is behind this is like literally hundreds of questions that we are asking the AI in order to pull out these buckets. But what's happening on the front end for the hiring manager is they get an overall score on the candidate, score out of 1 out of 4, and then they get the candidate's kind of strengths and weaknesses in a short summary at the top.
Wow. Why'd you guys do a 4-point scale instead of like 5 or 7?
Gavin and I both come from Google, so a lot of this is heavily inspired by Google's rubrics, to be completely honest. I believe the reason Google does a 4-point scale is because they really don't want to, they want
a bunch of 3s.
Exactly. They want an interviewer to make a decision one way or another.
It's good or bad. It's like above average or below average. You can't have something.
You cannot just like cop out, basically.
Yeah.
But we also don't allow ourselves to cop out. We want to like make sure we're providing value to the company.
We do the same thing when we're evaluating startups, actually, for the same reason.
We have the same thing, even with the cheating detection, actually, because people will cheat in all kinds of interesting ways now. We used to have a signal where we would have like a yellow flag where it's like, oh, maybe they cheated, and we're like, this is dumb. Like either they cheated or they didn't. We have to stand by our decision.
We say 1 through 5s, no 3s, basically. So effectively, it's a 4-point scale.
Yeah.
So you have to do a 2.5 or a 3.5. You cannot do a 3.
I see. You're allowed halves, though.
You could do halves. Yeah, we can do halves with our scales. Effectively, it's like a 10-point scale. But anyway.
Cool. We have 3 categories right now overall, which is problem solving, technical skills, and communication collaboration. The technical skills are, I think, more stereotypically what an engineering interview would have, which is just, are they using the right data structures? Do they seem to know how to code? But
can we stop and let's just appreciate how advanced AI has gotten in just a few years here? That you can build something like this in a few months, effectively, right? You've been launched for a couple months. YC was 3 or 4 months long. And you started working on the idea pretty much before you got into YC. And now you have this fully built AI interviewer that can assess people at scale for their technical capabilities, return a bunch of natural language and ratings, areas that they're good at, areas they're not so good at. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
First of all, I'll say shout out to Gavin. Gavin is really an excellent engineer, and that is why this is so good. I don't think it would be so good, basically, if most other people made this. But the other thing, and I'll mention, is, Sonnet and some of these models, they've been trained on so much coding data in particular that they're really good. Like they're actually exceptionally good at understanding code in real time. Because in real time, this interviewer is like seeing where you are in the code and like deciding whether or not to provide you hints or ask you follow-up questions or decide. It's not scripted, right? It's just based on the question, and like
there's a recursive loop running where it's evaluating every multiple times a minute about like, what's the status of this interview?
Right. Should I say something? Should I not? Like we have a fine-tuned model specifically for that to make sure, just for the should I speak or should I not speak. And we have to do that because we want to make sure the candidate experience is so good.
Wow, there's one model just evaluating whether or not I should speak to the. That's amazing. So it's a multi-agent model.
Up forever, but that
Wow.
is how it works.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, it's
well that AI can do this in like the latency has gone down so much, and I think as voice to voice gets better and better, we'll be able to do more different kinds of interviews. You can imagine instead of having a coding interface, a spreadsheet interface, a whiteboard, or just like use your monitor and use your own tools, and we'll just like watch your screen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we can do, and you can just analyze so much about a candidate now that you couldn't before.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, and the latency, like even 2 years ago when ChatGPT 3 came out, you couldn't do this, right? And now,
you couldn't do this even like even in June of last year. I think you couldn't properly do this.
The latency would have been so slow, and
the latency would have been slow. The voice quality wasn't as good. I think Prachie coming in,
the token cost of running these models would have been too expensive, and
totally. Voice generation used to be really slow, and voice generation has just gotten so much faster, which is also a huge piece of this. So we've been able to, our turnaround times are like less than.
So that's amazing. So about a month, you started wrenching on ideas before a month before you got into YC. At what point you were like, oh, what was that aha moment? Was it interview 250th? Was it the 50th interview? How many of these interviews did you go through? You're like, this is it. This is the problem.
Right before we launched on YC, the time it became like, oh, this is it, was like, we launched on YC's like LinkedIn. We got literally 40 meetings booked within a week. It was like insane the number of meetings we had booked that week. And
this is their launch feed.
Their launch feed, yeah.
Yeah.
They do on LinkedIn. Within like, especially that first week of meetings where I think the most high intent people, like we would show up to the meeting, we would just do the demo that was already described in the LinkedIn post. We were just, I think, proving to them that this product really existed. And people would commit like that, like in the meeting, in the 30-minute call, that they were ready to give it a shot. And I think that's when we were like, oh, this is something. Because it had been so hard. I think this is like advice that I've heard from other people, and I'll just reshare it because I think it was really helpful to us. Is that if you're like pulling teeth to get customers to use your product, you're probably not doing product market fit. But if I've been in this place, I'm like, oh no, it's because I'm not following up correctly. My messaging is bad. Like I'm not using the right channels. But like if people aren't coming, it's probably they don't want it. Versus in this case, finally, we had figured out something where we were like, oh, people are ready like today to start using this.
Can I use it now? Like how much does it cost?
Right.
Yeah. So they're starting to
pose questions like 15 minutes into the first call is when I was like, oh, this is like a real thing.
This is a hair on fire problem that people want. They have a budget to solve it right now. There's a real cost. Engineering costs are among the highest in tech. Hundreds of dollars per hour, let's say, in Silicon Valley.
And I really think that like cheating and the fact that skills are changing for interviews is like especially a hair and fire problem for people.
Yeah. Tell us more about the cheating, because that's the second time you've mentioned it. It seems to be something. Yes, it seems to be. And I remember when we originally spoke, you talked about it. And I was like,
both of these are really big problems that I think like people have been saying that engineering interviews are broken for like kind of since I've been in the tech space, like for 10 years at least. People are like, elite code is stupid, whatever. But like, that's true. But like the fact right now that like 40% of candidates are using ChatGPT on their take home assignments or even in their in-person interviews.
I mean, you could just download Anthropic's screen agent. It could read the screen and just give you advice on the side.
There's even specialized tools now for candidates to buy that are really expensive to just like, exactly. It's a voice agent that's listening in on your interview and telling you exactly what to say kind of thing. Or like you can just copy your prompt into ChatGPT and change the output a little bit. And
I remember doing this on my own interviews. Like back when I was doing PM interviews, I was like, I don't know how many golf balls fit into a 747,
Yeah, especially as people having more remote interviews, right? Where it's very easy for people to be typing at the same time. And like, I think what that really is a signal of is that the interviews are broken, right? We're testing for skills that are not actually the skills that are going to matter. People can like find that answer in like 5 seconds using the internet. So it's an opportunity for us to change the interview format or change at least what we're evaluating in the interview to something that's like less cheatable, basically.
And how does the cheating detection work? Is it another model that's somehow detecting, and do you prompt like, as a reminder, please don't use internet sources? Like what does that whole process look like?
Sure. So I'll be a little vague about this because I also don't want candidates to be gaming our cheating detection. There's 3 buckets of how we do our cheating detection today. The first bucket is kind of what I call like the via signals, I guess. It's like if someone copy pasted a bunch of code, we can detect that. If their mouse, we're tracking mouse position, tab position, cursor position, or focus, cursor position. And those are all signals that we use.
You can tell that they're all tabbing into different windows, different tabs, and
Totally, yeah. And then the second set of signals, which I think is actually the most common thing that flags candidates, is like what I call statistical signals. So this is how similar is this code to what comes out of the models, like our reference solutions, basically, and then also what other candidates write. If the code, and then also with that in the statistical analysis, it was the code written completely top to bottom, left to right, with no going back. Lucky for us, code is often not written linearly. If people are really writing the code, right, they go back and forth a little bit, but when people are cheating, they often go like top to bottom completely. And so those kinds of signals, basically on like how the code is written and how similar the code is to solutions, is like bucket 2. And bucket 3 is on the conversation side, and contextual kind of signals. So the fact that the AI is asking you questions. And so, if you answered one question really fast because the AI told you the answer, and then the AI will ask, can you explain what's happening on line 12? And then it takes you a long time to figure out what's happening on line 12. That's the sort of signal that we use as well. So it's pretty complicated.
Incredible.
It's very hard for people to cheat on.
That's incredible. So the candidate doesn't know that you're detecting this. You just tell your customer.
Yes. So we don't tell them in the interview that you're cheating. We do tell them before they start the interview. We have a huge thing that says, please don't cheat on this interview. We really will catch you. Like, we're industry leading.
Wow.
People still try to cheat it. But we don't call them out during the interview. We just tell the.
So how does this approach differ from other tools? Like there's HackerRank, there's ATS systems. You mentioned another one, and were they just contributing to the interview process being broken? Like, how do you think about your differentiation?
There's a few things here. I think none of these other tools that are out there are really trying to be a drop-in replacement for a human interviewer, as far as I can tell. I think they're really looking at their tool as like a whittling down tool. Like, okay, you put in thousands of candidates, you get out hundreds of candidates, and now you do the full interview process with the hundreds of candidates. So it's just like meant to be a way for you to like make sense of the noise. Versus what we are really trying to do is be a replacement for the human that's actually doing the interview, that's assessing a variety of skills, not just the code quality. And so what that means is companies can send us way more complicated questions than what you can do on HackerRank. Like, you actually can do the sort of questions that a human would do in an interview. It might be like a REST API or like a whiteboarding kind of solution. We're evaluating, of course, a lot more things. And we're trying to replace the time of a human interviewer versus like kind of being a SaaS product that just has a large question bank that like companies can just put candidates through. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's I think the main differentiator. And I think for us, like what I think about long-term for Lightscreen is we want to be the trusted source of truth on candidate skills. So you can imagine a world where we actually credential candidates for certain skills, and the candidates are able to go instead of their resume or in addition to their resume, their like list of Lightscreen credentials. And companies actually trust that because we actually verify the skills we've built up, that we like understand how to detect like detect cheating and also like evaluate skills. That companies really trust the evaluations that come out of us the way they like have trusted historically, like, higher ed institutions.
And this is something that nobody's really, I guess HackerRank tried to do this a little bit, but it's kind of like that G2 Crowd or Glassdoor, but for candidates, right? And I guess LinkedIn tried to do it with some of their LinkedIn learning stuff, some of their
there's like
skills
endorsements,
and endorsements and stuff. But or Udacity or Coursera with certificates. And
I think it's because technology didn't exist before. Like, I don't even blame them. I think they just didn't have a way to have an AI that's actually going to see what's happening on your entire screen, evaluate this level, then this number of signals on candidates, and be able to actually do it back and forth rather than just being like a static interface. So I think they just didn't have the tech before to do what I think people have known for a long time would be valuable. It's just like, we couldn't do it. Even now, we're kind of on the edge of, I think, whether or not we can do it. I'm betting that O3 and some of these other models, we're going to make this better and better for us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's wild. Anything that you would tell somebody starting YC or thinking about applying to YC? I get this all the time because we have YC focused funds. We have like 60 YC companies. So I'll get people reaching out from a network like, hey, how do I get into YC? Or like, is it worth it? Or, in hindsight, what would you tell somebody?
I have a lot of advice, but I guess you're not too early. Just apply. Worst case, you'll get some useful feedback, hopefully, out of it. And it'll be a good exercise for you anyway to do the application process. So I think we were concerned we were a little too early. And, like YC is a great place for you to like figure out if your idea is good or not. The earlier you do it, the less time you kind of waste. So I'd encourage people to just apply. And then in terms of, is it worth it? I mean, it's even for me and Gavin, where I kind of thought maybe it wouldn't be as worth it for us just because we have been in the industry for a while and honestly do have some of our own connections already. It's so helpful to just have like smart people who've done this before telling you the obvious stuff. Like, it's not like they're telling you some rocket science. It's just like, focus on the customer, make sure you're getting them to pay you, like simple things like that. But just having someone say that to you really deliberately that you respect, it does really push you forward. And the other founders being there to push you forward and like, kind of friendly compete with is helpful.
Do they have like an internal kind of leaderboard so kind of who's doing the best in the batch, or is it kind of like informal?
They don't really have that, but they do have, we have every 2 weeks meetings with like a pod of like 15 or so startups, and you kind of hear how everyone's doing in that pod, so you can kind of get a mental
Give a
peace.
sense
They
for
don't
if you're,
actively try to, and I think
yeah,
that it's a long game versus a short game. So
yeah,
you try not to compare yourself in the moment, but I think all the founders are naturally competitive.
yeah,
We can't help ourselves.
right.
Yeah, which is good. I think it just pushes us to be.
Yeah. And I like what you said there too. It's really a marathon. It's not a 100-meter dash. So this is like a 10-year journey, any startup that you're going to do or longer. And, I've seen a lot of companies flame out. They're kicking ass coming out of YC. They close around in 2 days and they got $1 million of ARR, and then they just like go sideways for years.
Yeah.
And I've seen the opposite happen where they're just like floundering for a year or two, just trying everything, grinding. And then all of a sudden they take off, and everything in between.
There's oddly, like, Stanford is a very strange business school where I feel like I didn't learn a lot of business, but I learned a lot of just how to keep your mind right in difficult situations, and that being such a consistent part of sales and also of leadership, of just when things are good, enjoy it, but also like don't go crazy. But when things are bad, also don't go crazy. And I think, we're working in hiring software, so I think it's particularly attuned to like the ups and downs of the market.
What a good time. I think you might look back at this and be like, we nailed this right at the right time, because that's something I think about as an investor, like, because hiring was so dead in 23, 24. And now you have this new technology that unlocks a new way of doing it in more efficient ways, saves time, saves money. And now all of a sudden hiring, I think, is going to come back in 25, 26. And so like, I think you'll look back and be like, oh, 24 was like a really good time to found this company.
That is part of our hypothesis too.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. Well, we're in cahoots there. Why don't we wrap up with a rapid fire?
Sure. Let's do it.
What is the most exciting application of AI you've seen outside of what you guys are doing?
I mean, some of the stuff, you've seen like the AI advertisements that are out there. Like,
yeah, where they it's like Minority Report, and they customize it to you as a person.
Yeah, that is
custom imagery, custom videos. Hey, Brian, picture your family like on a Mediterranean cruise. How did you know? Like, yeah,
totally. And like, even like, you can like have better representation and like speak to the specific person's problems. I feel like there's actually a lot of very cool stuff happening in advertising and content creation.
What book or resources had the biggest impact on your entrepreneurial journey?
Okay, so books that have been really helpful for me on my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, I really like biographies of entrepreneurs. So I read Walter Isaacson's book on Elon recently.
Oh, yeah.
That was genuinely fantastic biography.
Yeah, so good.
I read his stuff on Steve Jobs. I read the stuff on Jennifer Doudna. Like, all of those have been great. Even though Jennifer Doudna, you might not like think of as like a founder, but really like a leader in her field. Is one of the CRISPR innovators. And it's cool because you get to learn a lot about like their space, and also you get to see someone's like leadership talent really up close.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that biography as well. What's one underrated skill that candidates should focus on showcasing in their technical interviews?
Communication skills. I mean, it's not, what I mean by communication is not seem likable and do small talk. It's like, can you explain your code? And can you explain how you come to this solution you've come to? Just like talking out loud more. It's amazing how many candidates still to this day are like, okay, give me a minute to think for 5 minutes, and then just like write perfect code. Like, that is not going to help you in this interview, and it's not going to help you in life. You have to bring people along with you on the journey. And I would really encourage candidates to just talk more as they're thinking. That's
an interview hack actually that I used to deploy. Is instead of just silently thinking about it, I'll just be like, oh, okay, and just think out loud. And I'm a think out loud person anyways. It worked out for me, but yeah,
I think for engineers, sometimes it's not natural to push yourself.
Besides Lightscreen, as a product leader, what's your favorite tool you've ever worked on?
Oh, you're making me choose between all my children. I mean, working at Assembly AI was really exceptional. So at Assembly, I was the head of product, and Assembly is a API for speech to text and speech understanding products. And what was awesome about that is that I love working on API products. I'm not doing that right now, but I enjoy it because it's a building block for other people to build their companies. So you could just see what all the voice bot companies were doing with audio data. And it was so cool. You get to talk to them. I remember the first time we talked to Spotify. Spotify is one of Assembly's biggest customers. And like, they're using us for some like ad placement algorithms. And it was just like, wow, they really need this. Like, this could not work without Assembly. And like, when you realize just like how much they need the product that you're building, it's very inspiring. So I think Assembly is probably one of the coolest things I worked on. But honestly, I mean, RightOS was so cool. GoPuff was like everything that I've got. I've been very lucky with the sort of things that work.
Yeah. How do you balance, as you think about kind of the next chapter of scaling, maintaining a leanness to the startup, being a lean startup versus like scaling up the headcount? Like, how do you kind of think about this next chapter?
I think because I come from being in the Valley over the last 10 years, where there's been like a lot of ups and downs during COVID and stuff, where I'm really focused on staying as lean as possible, where it's not inhibiting your growth, is kind of my framework for it. Is like, if I'm at a point where I know one more person would actually mean one more, like like specific revenue, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hire that person immediately. And I think what that means is you're kind of always warm hiring. Like I'm maintaining relationships with my network. And like, if someone amazing comes along, of course, I'll like figure it out. But like in terms of actively doing hiring, I am doing it when I know that like there's like a set of work that we could be doing that'd be so impactful and we're already losing out. And actually, that's honestly like, we're pretty close to that right now on the engineering side. So I think we will be hiring an engineer pretty soon. So anyone great, let me know.
Yeah, of course, I'll help. What's a misconception about AI in hiring that you'd like to debunk?
I think some people think jobs are just over. I think people think AI is going to take the engineering jobs or take all of the jobs, or the white collar jobs. And I think, I mean, that's like a cool utopia maybe, but I think that jobs are just going to get more and more abstract or they're going to change really dramatically. I think it's not like people like to work, but it gives people a sense of purpose and it does like structure society in a way. And also it is, to the conversation we were having earlier about the skills that are going to be necessary. There are things that you do really trust a person for that you don't trust an AI for. And so I do.
Or at least a human with an AI,
I think working with an AI.
And I do it all the time as a solo VC, the solo GP VC. Like I'm talking to the AI about stuff.
Totally.
I'll be on a call with a founder and I'll be like, tell me about this space, and I'll be listening to the founder and I'll be kind of checking it with the AI, what they're saying. And it becomes like this companion co-pilot, to use a Microsoft term, but it does. It's this thing that I get to collaborate with, and work is changing. But I think to your point, I don't think it goes away either. I think if anything, there's a Jevons paradox, where, economically the cost of inputs are dropping, therefore the quantity demanded will go up. And you'll see a supply of software, infiltrating every nook and cranny in the market. And it's an exciting time to be an investor because of that, with less capital needs. So where can folks interested in using Lightscreen or just generally to learn more, find out more?
Yeah, if you go to lightscreen.ai, there's a ton of information on our website. And then you can also book time with me directly there. And I'm happy to show you a more in-depth demo of what we've built and how it could be helpful to you.
Well, this was an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for coming on.
Sure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.